Oh, and it is the 10-minute warning. Look at that. We are live and up and running for today's N10-009. That is our Network Plus study group. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's the pre-show. We've got about 9 minutes and 30 seconds until we get started. We start at the top of the hour. This is my chance to make sure the stream is working. The video looks good. I haven't forgotten anything. Well, 2 out of 3, right? So we got plenty to go through today. All new questions for Network Plus. So in this pre-show, I'm just going to make sure we're looking at all of our cameras. This is our video switcher screen right in front of me. All 4 of our cameras look good. I have 8 inputs. I'm not even using the other 4. One of them I've got just as a stream input, so you can kind of see what I see on the screen. Let's see if I can, it's number 6. So that's that one right here is what you are seeing. See, you can't see it because it's the Hall of Mirrors problem. But that is what I see on that streaming box. We've also got, but I have these like 3 additional or 4 additional inputs. I really should do something with those. I need cameras, apparently. I'm not sure what I would point at. I'm not sure where those would go. Maybe one on the ceiling looking straight down at the mess that is my desk. That might be good. Well, if I had something in front of me that I demonstrated often, that might be good, but I don't generally. So anyway, that's just one of the many things I think about is how to pump even more money into this boat to see. You never get money out of a boat. You put money in a boat, it's really for entertainment. And apparently that's what we're doing here as well. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Step on up, get into the chat room. Hello, chat room. Folks checking in from Nepal and from Germany and from Massachusetts. We've got, it's a good group. Look at this group in the chat room. Malk is here early. Everybody, stop what you're doing. Call a friend or a family member. Let them know Malk is early in the chat. Good to hear from you, sir. Hope things are going well. Hopefully you didn't, if you've ever wanted to know where Malk is, let's see if I can bring up, there it is. So this must be you out here in the middle of the ocean. I think that's probably the accurate representation. And we're getting here into the end of the year. That means hurricane season will hopefully be leaving us soon. It was a good year, I think, for all of us. So I'm very happy about that. Hey, folks, checking in. Romania, Las Vegas, Italy, South Africa, Thailand, Michigan, Switzerland, Delaware, London, NYC in the house. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. We need a borough. Illinois is here. Pennsylvania, Naples, Italy, not the Naples, Florida. We are here in Florida. That's the Naples I thought of. But thank you for adding the additional info. We've got UK, Kathmandu. We have Washington, D.C., Connecticut, Iceland. Iceland? That's outstanding. That is incredible. Things have kind of settled down there, hopefully, here recently. It got a little hot. It got a little volcanic there recently. I haven't checked in. You'll have to give us an update on how things are going. Thank you so much for being here. We have so much great things to look at, to focus on, to get to really talk networking today. So this will be great. We have been super busy here with just tons of things that are going on and updates to this and changes to that. And we're just trying to keep the party going. And so far, so good. It's really worked out nicely. Mo says taking the Network Plus exam on Friday. All right, this is the last big push until that exam. Hopefully we'll have good questions for you today. I think we will. We'll see how you do with that. We'll close out some stuff on our screen here. We get started at the top of the hour. This is not the show. This is not the study group. I get it. Occasionally we'll get letters and I get letters. I get a bird will come in. I'll get an owl. I get emails and people will talk about, well, I was going to watch this study group, but it's really just the back of your head. Well, no, it isn't. See, you'll see me like this up here eventually. You will actually see what is going on here. But currently, yes, I guess technically speaking, you are correct. It is the back of my head. That's kind of what you get until we get started here. It's just sort of a way for me to look at what you see. Plus, people have often asked, well, what does the studio look like? It is this desk. The studio is everything you see in front of you. So that's what that is. One of these days, I will need to do a breakdown, like a detailed video breakdown of each one of these components so that you can understand how it works and how many monitors is enough. I don't know yet. We need a couple more. We need some. My problem is not the number of monitors, it's the size of the monitor. Because I figure if you're putting a monitor in place, why would you get a little monitor? You need a big monitor. So that's what's going on there. And of course, the moment I go live, someone rings the doorbell. Literally the moment I go live. So we're going to peek in at what in the world is going on in the front of my house right now. And of course, that is something I will need to address. So everybody, as you were, I will be back in 2 minutes. Keep doing what you're doing here. All right, and that was quick. That was fast. That was much faster. My family is on it. They got my back. How many monitors is enough? We didn't answer the question. So it's not about the number of monitors. It's about, can I see the monitor? This is probably not a concern for many of you. What do you mean? Can you see the monitor? Oh, wait. So, but that when you're on a live stream and you need to immediately glance over and see what you see, it really needs to be a screen that is big enough to see what you see. And so that's why sort of the streaming front end is so big here. Technically speaking, I was going to get a smaller screen for this one, but I had a large screen for the switcher so that I could see these tiny little boxes in here. And I figure, well, if I'm going to get another monitor, I should get exactly the same monitor that way, or at least the same size, so I can swap it out if there's a problem. Like if this one goes dead, I could connect up that one and I've got the same size. So maybe that's just me trying to justify a larger monitor. You wouldn't be entirely wrong with that. And it does look good in here. It looks pretty good. You can't see the lights that are up here. You can kind of see them reflecting off my hand here, but there are lights just above the camera view there. And that's what's going on there. Oh, hope everybody is doing well. Hope everybody is all ready for Network Plus today. We got 2 minutes to go on this one. This is a pretty good setup right now. It is getting cleaner and more compact. You know, we couldn't do this 10 years ago, but now everything is sort of shrunk down into a small little piece. The mixers are so much smaller. The video switchers, which you can't see, the green and red lights down here, it's a 1U high video switcher. I mean, that's it. That's all you need for 4K video. 8 inputs, multiple outputs. It's remarkable. And a lot of audio processing on the switcher itself. It is just ridiculous what we're able to do these days. We are living in the future, and I'm here for it. Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can get these questions up and running today. Things look good there. Do I have my circle on the screen? I do. Gosh, what else? I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't like it when things are working perfectly. That makes me nervous. That makes me feel like I missed something, which is probably true. But we will see. We are recording. You can see my silence down here. Oh, what we don't have. There we go. See, I did miss something. There's your link. If you'd like to put your pin in our virtual pin cushion, you're welcome to do that. We'll have to see how it goes here. We are approaching the top of the hour where we will get started, get things going. So hopefully, I think all of you seem to be ready to go. It's time for me to be ready to go with these. The stream look good. Stream looks very good. Things are fine there. We're in great shape. So that way we can get things started, get you some questions, get some answers. We have a lot to go through today. I like that part, though. I write these questions usually on the weekend, so I've almost forgotten what I wrote originally. Plus, they're questions that are left over from last month because I write too many questions. I write more questions than we have time to do because I like to be prepared. So we will see. 12 noon straight up. Let's bring up our keynote. Let's wait for a green light. Green light, please. There it is. Let's hit the play button. Lee. That looks good. Gosh, I think we can do a live stream, everybody. What do you think? I think so too. Let's get it started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2025 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I take questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. We ask you these questions online. You answer the question online, and then we see how well we did. That's always the fun part, right? Did we get the question right? Did we get the question wrong? We will find out in just a moment as we get into the details of this. If you are joining us live, you can participate and answer the question online yourself by heading over to the link that you see on your screen. Pop open a new browser window and head over to professormesser.com/QA, and you will be able to join us in our questions and our answers. Now, if you do that, if you go to that link, you will see a question is already waiting for you. The question that is waiting for you says, a switch administrator has configured link aggregation between two switches, but only one side is configured to use LACP. Which of the following would be the most likely result of this configuration? Now, this is a question from last month, so it should look familiar. This is the only question you will get today that is a repeat in any way, but we didn't do great on this question last month. So I thought I would ask it again here in the very beginning to make sure that everybody is able to get in and answer questions at the link you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. As a reminder, of course, please do not put answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. This question asks, a switch administrator has configured link aggregation between two switches, but only one side is configured to use LACP. Which of the following would be the most likely result of this configuration? Is it lag will work in manual mode? Trunking mode will need to be turned on. The interface's status will be set to suspended. Throughput will be less optimal than normal, and the switches will need to be restarted. It's one of these. I guess, or the switches will need to be restarted. It's going to be one of those answers. If you think you know the answer, put not in that link, that one right there, put it in that link that you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. We will come back to this question in just a moment, and we will find out what the answer really is. Thank you so much for joining us. We do one of these study groups every month. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. This is the fun part where we'd like to see what you think the right answers are. But of course, when we are not here on a live stream, we are on social media. We're on our Discord. We're on our 24/7 chat there. You can find us by simply typing in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us at. So /YouTube, /X, /Instagram, /LinkedIn, /Discord. All of those are great places to go. And if there is a third-party site you want to find us on and we are not there, let me know, and I'll add us to that list as well. Today, we're going to talk about the N10-009. That is the Network Plus exam, the most recent and current version of the Network Plus exam. It was released on June the 20th of 2024. Just barely a year old at this point. That means that we would estimate the retirement of this exam to be somewhere around the fourth calendar quarter of 2027. So as we sit here at approaching the end of 2025, we have plenty of time to study and pass this version of the Network Plus exam. It's a single exam that you need to take. It gives you 90 minutes to answer what could be up to 90 questions. And on the scale of 100 to 900, you need to earn a 720. I'm not really sure mathematically how that works out. We do know that every question is worth a different number of points, but that gives you an idea of the number you should strive for. If you make a 720, you've passed. If you make less than that, you have not. So make sure you are familiar with what you are shooting for there and get that number up there when you hit the submit button at the end of the exam. The exam itself consists of multiple types of questions. Many of them will be multiple choice questions, but there are also performance-based questions, and I have a performance-based question for you today to be able to have a look and understand what those options might be as well. Not only do we have our free course available on the YouTube, you can also get course notes. You can get downloadable versions of the videos and audio. We have our Exam Hacks ebook and so much more. If you're studying for your Network Plus, we probably have some study materials that might work for you. Have a look at those at professormesser.com/netsuccess. see if any of those might be something that you might be able to use for your studies. Don't forget that this live stream will be available for replay immediately afterwards on our YouTube channel. We also create an audio-only podcast version of this. It is available at professormesser.com/podcast. We have our A+, our Network Plus, and our Security Plus Study Group podcasts there. You can find that replay so that it can be automatically downloaded to your favorite listening device, and then you can take it in the car, you can take it while working out, places where you would normally not be watching the video. And if you look at our YouTube channel, about a day after we're done, you'll notice the YouTube video description has been updated with timestamps. Those are there thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this probably at 2x speed, putting in all of those timestamps. Hopefully that's something that you've been able to find some value from. We've been doing this for years, and I think it helps people find exactly what they're looking for. And time is a very important commodity when you are studying for a certification exam. We don't have all of the time in the world every day to be able to study. Let's try to focus this just a little bit, and hopefully these timestamps can help you along those as well. Also, you may want to join us over on Discord. That is a platform that allows you to do real-time chat, to stream video and audio, have your own study room on our Discord. We have thousands of people that have joined our Discord that are studying for their Network Plus, their Security Plus, their A+, and other certifications. It's a great place to hang out. That's where I will be after we're done here. You can usually find me on the Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take the exam if you want to become Network Plus certified. And if you are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory, you could go out to the CompTIA website and pay full price for the voucher. But why wouldn't you pay less for the voucher if it happened to be available? Same voucher from the same place, but costs less. That's over at professormesser.com/vouchers. Not only do you get a voucher that's already been discounted, the discounted price is available and shown on our website, but we also give you a little bit more, something you can't get anywhere else, and that is our Exam Hacks ebook. This is a book I wrote with a lot of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years as I've taken these many and various industry certification exams, and I give you an idea of things you can do during the study process to make that process go a little bit easier. I also give you some strategies you might want to consider using during the exam itself, perhaps might get you a couple of extra points, and sometimes a couple of extra points is all you need. This is included for free when you purchase a voucher from our website. It's also available if you purchase a success bundle. We do not sell it separately, however. This is the only way you will get that exclusive ebook at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to the question we asked earlier. The question was, a switch administrator has configured link aggregation between two switches, but only one side is configured to use LACP. Which of the following would be the most likely result of this configuration? Well, lag will work in manual mode. Trunking mode will need to be turned on. The interface status will be set to suspended. Throughput will be less optimal than normal, or the switches will need to be restarted. Well, which one did you choose? Let's stop our poll and see what you think the right answer is. We pretty much have the same answers we did last month. We're just not sure. This idea of understanding link aggregation and LACP and what is it doing and what in the world are you talking about? Let's step through it and see if we can understand what the differences are. 35% of you say the answer is the interface status will be set to suspended. 30% right behind it say the throughput will be less optimal than normal. 17% say trunking mode will need to be turned on. 11% say lag will work in manual mode. And lastly, we have 7% that say the switches will need to be restarted. When we're talking about link aggregation, we're talking about connecting switches together using multiple connections in order to have a higher amount of available bandwidth between those two devices. But as you probably know, when you start plugging in multiple cables between two switches, it's very possible to create a loop. So the switches support a mode known as link aggregation, or lag, where you can configure certain interfaces on that switch to work in tandem, to work together as if they are one single physical connection. You're logically sticking all of these connectors together and using them as an aggregate. And when you use that, there's an option to either manually configure it or have it be able to dynamically configure it using a protocol known as the Link Aggregation Control Protocol, or LACP. You can do that. Now, but if you set one side for one configuration and one side for the other type of configuration, you have a problem because there's a mismatch and the switch doesn't know what to do. One switch says to do it one way, one switch says to do it another way. And when you run into a scenario where you simply cannot figure out the details between any of those, then you end up with an interface that is set to suspended mode. The switch knows that it's a bad configuration. It simply can't pass the information from one switch to another, so it simply puts those interfaces into a mode where no harm can be done, and that is a suspended mode. This is very common if you set Link Aggregation Control Protocol on one side, but not on the other side. So they have to match when you're working through these particular types of configurations. And that's why 35% of you said, yep, you've got a problem there because the interface status will be set to suspended. And that is the answer that indeed we were looking for. Now, why would it not be the others? 30% of you said the throughput will be less optimal than normal. I guess technically you're correct because the throughput will be zero. There will be nothing. And I guess technically that is definitely less optimal than normal. Not really the best answer, though, in this particular scenario. Really, it's not optimal at all when there's no traffic going by. Not the best answer here, not the one you should have chosen. 17% say trunking mode will need to be turned on. A link aggregation doesn't necessarily have to be a trunked configuration. So this may have nothing to do with trunking. And whenever you have one side set to LACP and one side not set for LACP, has nothing to do with trunking. So that would not be the answer we were looking for. 11% say lag will work in manual mode. Well, it would have had we manually configured lag on both sides. Lag is link aggregation. It would have been easy if we had configured them manually on both sides, but that's not what happened. One side was manual, but the other side was set to LACP. So that's not the answer we were looking for. Although technically lag would work if both sides were set to a manual mode. And 7% said the switches will need to be restarted. Thankfully, we don't have to reset our switches a lot. Thankfully, they just run and run and run without even having to touch or do anything to them. And in this particular case of setting up link aggregation, doesn't require any reboots. I guess the only time you really run into a scenario with restarting a switch might be when you upgrade the software, the firmware that runs that particular switch. There are some switches you may find that allow you to turn on or turn off layer 3 mode. So you can turn that switch also into a router and a switch at the same time. That particular configuration is one where you would need to restart when you're moving between L2 and L3, layer 2 and layer 3 configurations. Some switches will do that without having to reboot. A lot of switches do require you to reboot. So that's another example where your switches might need to be restarted. In this case, however, when you are setting one side with one configuration and one side with the other configuration, you're probably going to be left with a suspended mode, and that was the answer that we were looking for here as well. Hopefully that you were able to get in, answer the questions. It's like a number of you were able to do that. So now let's throw some new questions at you. Everything from this point forward are questions you have not seen before. And the question that I would like to present to you now is not a multiple choice question, but instead is a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are questions that CompTIA creates that are simply not multiple choice. They could be almost any other design, format, and style that you could think of. It might be a matching question. It might be a fill in the blank. It might be a drag and drop question. They might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform some functions. And every month we have a brand new performance-based question for you. This month is no different. The performance-based question for you today is all about DNS, and it is a matching question. This question asks, match the best DNS record. That's all we want to know from the different DNS records I have. I have 7 DNS record types listed on the screen, and I have a number of different things that are associated with those DNS records or should be associated with those DNS records. Let's step through all 7 of these records. They are the NS, CNAME, TXT, Quad A, MX, PTR, and A. Those are the records. Kind of a funny grouping of abbreviations, isn't it? Here are the 5 scenarios that I would like you to match to the appropriate record that is being used. The first one is find the IPv4 address of www.professormesser.com. What DNS record is used for that? The second on our list is the legal department is sending an email to a consulting firm. Okay, there's a DNS something associated with DNS in there. What is that something? The third on our list, C, is determine the FQDN of an IP address. What DNS record allows us to do that? Fourth on our list is the IP address of the email server is the same as the web server. Happens all the time. And the last one is identify the authorized IP address of the outgoing email server. So those are the 5 different scenarios that we would need to create a DNS record for. And that DNS record is the one that allows us to perform those particular functions. If you think you know the answer, please use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer to us. There are a number of answers that are already coming in. This is more of a fill-in-the-blank question, however, so we're not going to show the answers on the screen, but we will go through each one of these to determine what the actual answer should be. So make sure you make a note, at least mentally, of what you have answered on this one, so you'll be able to answer it with us as well. DNS records, there's a whole section of these on the exam, objectives, rather. You may or may not get any questions about DNS records on your exam, but it's such a big section that I would imagine you get at least one of them. You never know, though. The random number generator, the machine that makes all of that happen, sometimes it's just a mystery. Sometimes we have no idea what those are. One thing that you'll notice we're really good at with the Network Plus especially is acronyms. We get a lot we've already talked about LACP and LAG. Now we're talking about NS and CNAME and TXT and Quad A, and it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it? Acronyms is a big part of this exam. It's a big part of the language we use for networking. And because there's so much networking in security, a number of these acronyms are also used on Security Plus. You might also recognize a number of these acronyms from your A+ studies if you've started there. So there is sometimes a little bit of technology overlap, although the context of how those acronyms are used might vary quite a bit between the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus. Let's go through the questions and answers on this one and see how we did with matching the best DNS record for each one of these scenarios. The first one is find the IPv4 address of www.professormesser.com. This is kind of the basic blocking and tackling of DNS, isn't it? This is what we commonly use DNS for. When we connect to a site in our browser, we type in www.professormesser.com. We're not typing in an IP address, but somehow we get an IP address to connect to behind the scenes. We might not even know what that IP address is. And the reason that that is able to work is a DNS record known as the address record, or A record. It is A for IP version 4. If you are looking up the IP address of a fully qualified domain name and the IP address is IPv6, then it is a quad A record, A record. So make sure that you are familiar with what those different options are between an A record and a quad A, because you might be asked to differentiate between all of those. Next on our list is the legal department is sending an email to a consulting firm. Well, there has to be some type of DNS record that works behind the scenes to figure out how do we get this email to some email address at a consulting firm somewhere. And if you are configuring your DNS, one of the most important records that will be configured so that people can find your email server is MX. We're going to do a query for the MX record for the domain name associated with that email that we're sending. So if we're sending the email to james@consultingfirm.com, well, where's the consultingfirm.com's email server? The only way you would know is if you queried DNS and said, could you please tell me what IP address should be sending this email to? Otherwise, I won't know where to send the mail. Otherwise, that consulting firm would never receive my message unless we did a query of their MX record. And that tells us exactly where to send that email. This is why we often say you should never, never, never touch anything associated with DNS unless you really know what you're doing, because one single change can disrupt quite a number of different areas of communication, either direct access to your web server, email messages, and so much more. You could really disrupt your internal Active Directory infrastructure quite well. It depends on DNS as well. Next on our list is determine the fully qualified domain name. That's what an FQDN is. Determine the fully qualified domain name of an IP address. This is a little backwards than what we did in the A option, which was find the IPv4 address of www.professormesser.com. Well, what if we had an IP address and we were wondering, I wonder what the fully qualified domain name is of this IP address? Well, you can perform what's known as a reverse lookup on the DNS server to determine what that is. But to be able to get a name back, there has to be a specific record configured with that reverse lookup. And that record is known as a pointer record. PTR is what that record type is. So if there is not a PTR record, then you will not get a response back. And you could try this from NSLookup. You could try it from dig. You can do it at the command line of your machine right now. You could type in NSLookup and then an IP address of some kind that you are looking for and see if it can give you a fully qualified domain name or not. If there's a PTR record, you might be able to get one. Next on our list is the IP address of the email server is the same as the web server. This happens a lot, especially with smaller organizations that want to put FTP, email, web, and other services on the same computer, the same device, which makes it so much easier to manage. Everything is in one single place. But to be able to do that, it's very difficult. Why would you want to make separate address records that are to the same place? It's much easier if you have a single address record and then you have aliases that are associated with that, or what we call in the world of DNS, a canonical name. So this is sort of the reverse name of figuring this out. It's an alias of that particular server. So we could put email.domain.com and put www.domain.com, and they would have exactly the same IP address, but you're naming them with different aliases. This means if you ever change the IP address of your web/email/file transfer server, that ever changes, you only have to change one record instead of having to change multiple records in your DNS. This will save you a lot of time in the future, so take advantage of those CNAME records. And lastly, we have identify the authorized IP address of the outgoing email server. An authorized IP address, well, that's something that we have created in the internals of our email systems so that when we receive an email from someone, we could check to see if it was really sent by an authorized email server. This helps us get rid of anything that may have been sent to us with spam. And certainly if you've not registered and put into your DNS what your authorized email servers are, a lot of your emails may be stuck in a spam folder somewhere when you're sending that to someone else. To be able to identify that IP address, we need to add those IP address records to a text record. Specifically, these would be an SPF formatted text record. We talk all about email services and SPF and DMARC and other functions of managing spam on email in Network Plus and in Security Plus and in A Plus to some degree. So all of these are available in the video that you see here. It's in section N10-009, section 3.4. The name of the video that contains these is DNS records. This is only a subset of these records. Obviously, we did not use the NS record. That's the name server record. That's how you find the name server for a particular domain. We have the Quad A record, as I already mentioned. That is your address record for IPv6. Why didn't we do 6As? Wouldn't that have made more sense? Well, I guess it's all about room. It's all about the amount of storage we have, right? And then lastly, the one we didn't use. That was really the last two, wasn't it? Those are all 7. It sure is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in our list. So to summarize, finding the IPv4 address of www.professormesser.com is an A record. The legal department sending an email to a consulting firm will look up that mail server using an MX record. Determining the fully qualified domain name of an IP address is the pointer record, or PTR. The IP address of the mail server being the same as the web server is identified as part of a canonical name record, or CNAME. And then lastly, we identify the authorized IP address of the outgoing email server through the use of an SPF formatted text record, or TXT. Knowing how these DNS records are used and when you would reference those records is an important part of this section. Make sure you are very familiar with that, and you'll do perfectly well on the exam. You'll pass every one of those questions on the exam if you know that information. That is our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you did pretty well on that. We had some great questions and answers come in about that one. It's another great way that you could determine how well you really know some of this DNS information. I'll also let you know that that same link that you used to answer this question, which is professormesser.com/QA, is also a link that you can use to submit questions for our after show. When we're done in this first hour, I will open up the questions. We'll take questions from anything that you've submitted, and I'll be able to answer questions from you about technology, about certifications, or about anything else that you would like to know about. It's that same link we've been using, professormesser.com/QA. We already got a little bit of a look at the next question on our list, so let's do this next question, and it asks, a user has disconnected their desktop computer from the network and plugged in their personal laptop, but the laptop is not communicating over the network. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be the firewall is filtering content, the default credentials have been changed, port security is enabled, the password is expired, or IPS has identified a potential attack? Quite a number of options to choose from there. All of them could be things happening on our network. The question again asks, a user has disconnected their desktop computer from the network and plugged in their personal laptop, but the laptop is not communicating over the network. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is a firewall filtering content? Default credentials have been changed? Port security is enabled? Password has expired? Or IPS has identified a potential attack? You think you know the answer? Put your answer in at the link you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Tell me what you think the right answer is for this one. If you don't know, just take a guess. The best part of this is there's no bad things that happen if you get a question wrong. In fact, probably getting a question wrong is a good thing in this context because it gives us a chance to really talk about this particular topic, and then you really know what the answer might be on your actual exam. One of those things you can really consider when trying to decide which one of these answers is really the best, which one should I do next. These are really good ideas if you're breaking this out. Now, if you think you know the answer, of course, you want to submit that answer using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead answer it on the link that you see on your screen. Speaking of answers, let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a user has disconnected their desktop computer from the network and plugged in their personal laptop, but the laptop is not communicating over the network. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it firewall is filtering content, default credentials have been changed, port security is enabled, password has expired, or IPS has identified a potential attack? Let's close our poll and see how you did with this one. Big numbers. Very much different than the last question we had. 80% of you say that port security is enabled, and everything else is a single digit. I think we can call that one. That is the right answer. That's what we were looking for. It's port security that's keeping us from communicating on this network. We have a two-way tie for second place. 8% of you said the firewall is filtering content, and 8% of you say the IPS has identified a potential attack. And in a moment, we'll talk about why those are not the correct answer. Default credentials have been changed, only got 3% of the vote, and only 1% of you say the password has expired. Port security is a feature built into a number of different switches. Sometimes it's called different names, but we tend to just refer to it as port security. And this is a feature that allows us to limit who can simply plug into our network and simply gain access to the network. That is something our security folks are so worried about. If you've ever been in a corporate environment, especially something like a public room, like a conference room, a lot of those interfaces will be automatically disabled. You might even have to connect and authenticate yourself before you're able to use those, because the room very often is not being used. And somebody with a laptop could just walk into the room, plug into a jack, and now they're on your network. That is not what you want to do. There have been many times when I was working as a cybersecurity systems engineer, where people would let me in the door. Oh, well, I'll contact the people for the meeting. You can go into this conference room and get set up. And I'm in a conference room by myself for 10 minutes. Am I the kind of person you want to be in your conference room with nobody watching them for 10 minutes? Well, the answer is yes. I'm not going to do anything bad, but you probably shouldn't. In fact, I feel kind of weird in those environments. It's one of those where I don't want to be in a position where people might consider something untoward going on. Not something I want to do in that scenario. So security administrators will often configure their switch to look to see who would normally be connected to that interface. And if you happen to see someone else plug into that connection, this is usually done by the media access control address, or the MAC address, that is the burned in hardware address of that device, then it will say that, wait, this is a different computer that's connecting to this link, and it will disable that interface. Maybe it just sends an alert. Something will happen to let the security administrator know that someone unauthorized may have connected to an interface on our network, and you might find that there's additional security after that. It's never one thing. We might enable port security, then we might also turn on 802.1q, and we might also provide additional authentication factors during that login process. So it's usually a number of steps. There are a number of hurdles you have to get through to gain access to a particular network. This is one of those hurdles. That would be port security. 80% of you were spot on with this one. That is the correct answer that you were looking for. Let's talk about the questions or the answers we didn't have as a correct answer. The first one is, a firewall is filtering content. Well, we don't generally have firewalls on every single interface on the network. And this particular interface worked fine with the other computer. We plug in a different computer, and now we can't communicate. It's not going to be our firewall. Most firewalls allow you to communicate out, and that shouldn't be our issue. Is there some other firewall on the network? Probably not, that's in our way anyhow, because we didn't have a problem with the first computer. So that would not be the most likely reason for this issue. The other 8% of you said an IPS has identified a potential attack. And it would be great if we could have an intrusion prevention system on every single interface on our network. Unfortunately, that's not commonly the case. An intrusion prevention system is usually part of a much larger security appliance, very often a next generation firewall. So we would not generally see this on an individual interface, and usually not inside of your network either. Would it be nice to have an IPS on every single interface on your network? It would. We're starting to push out more of those capabilities down to the individual client devices using our more modern versions of anti-malware, anti-spyware, antivirus technologies. But in this case, probably not the situation that we're running into. 3% of you say the default credentials have been changed. What credentials? This question didn't even mention any credentials. And in this particular case, we know that one system was working. Well, if we plug in with another computer, we should at least be able to see something happening on the network, even if we didn't authenticate. But we are not. It's not communicating over the network at all. So probably not something related to credentials. We didn't even get a login prompt because it's not able to communicate on the network. And lastly, the password has expired. Again, we didn't get a login prompt. We weren't even able to get a login prompt because the laptop is not communicating over the network. So a password being expired would not be related to this particular issue. The answer is the one that 80% of you chose. Port security is what is blocking that. It's doing its job. It's working exactly as we configured it, so that someone can't simply unplug one device and plug their own computer in to somehow gain access to our internal network. That is exactly what we would be working on and worrying about if we were a security administrator of that particular network. If you want to learn more about this, it's in our N10-009 course, section 4.3, in a video titled Device Security. Let's do another particular question. This question will get out of the world of security, and we'll talk about this one that asks, an analysis of a network drop shows a high reading of next, N-E-X-T, capital letters. Which of the following would be the best way to address this measurement? Would it be to replace multi-mode with single mode, recrimp the connectors, verify continuity for all wires, use a crossover cable, or clean the connectors? All reasonable things to think about when you're troubleshooting a network, but only one really applies here. The question again asks, an analysis of a network drop shows a high reading of next. Which of the following would be the best way to address this measurement? Is it replace multi-mode with single mode, recrimp the connectors, verify continuity for all wires, use a crossover cable, or clean the connectors? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to submit and lock in what you think might be the right answer. If you're watching this on a replay, you can pick what you think the right answer is. Just remember that. And when we get to the answer screen, we'll get to see if you really got the answer right as well. Plug in your answer here. See if you know what this is. One of the things about networking is there's a vast amount of information that you need to know. Network Plus is really just your first foray into the world of networking. Networking is many and varied in its depth and breadth. So one of the things you'll often find, especially in the world of working through problems on the network, is there'll very often be things you've never seen before, which I kind of like about the world of networking. I like there's always something new to learn. This might be something new for you to learn. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, an analysis of a network drop shows a high reading of next. Which of the following would be the best way to address this measurement? Should we replace multi-mode with single mode? Should we recrimp the connectors? Should we verify continuity for all wires? Should we use a crossover cable? Or should we clean the connectors? Let's see what you answered for this one. Let's stop our poll and see what your answers were. Oh, we're all over the place again. Did not get a majority, but a plurality of you answered with 41% saying you would verify continuity for all of the wires. We have kind of a three-way tie for second place between 19% said replace multi-mode with single mode, 16% said to recrimp the connectors, and 15% say to use a crossover cable. And only 9%, almost a double digit, said to clean the connectors. So we had a lot of different options here. What's interesting about this one, let's see what the right answer happens to be. Oh, it was 16% of you that said the answer is recrimp the connectors. That's the answer that we were looking for. Well, I think this particular question goes back to a high reading of next. That doesn't even make sense when you say it out loud, isn't it? A high reading of near-end crosstalk is what we were looking for. Near-end crosstalk is a measurement that allows you to see how much of the traffic going through these wires is leaking over into other wires that are contained within that same bundle. I mean, we have 8 different wires inside of this network drop. All 8 of those wires have information being sent across them. And because of the nature of the electrical signals that we are sending through these wires, some of that signal will accidentally, if you will, by the use of what we're sending through, the strength of that signal and the type of cable we're using and all of these other variables, it might be heard inductively through these other wires that are in that exact same cable. Well, that's okay, because a little bit of noise leaking between wires is perfectly normal, can't be helped. What you want to do is minimize that near-end crosstalk. Crosstalk is what we refer to as that signal that we can hear from other wires. Near-end crosstalk means it is the signal strength of that crosstalk that we are seeing close to us, close to where we are taking the measurement. And if you think about it, when you're sending a signal across a wire, the most amount of power, the most amount of signal is going to be at the source. So when you're measuring near-in crosstalk at the source, this will probably be the worst amount of crosstalk that you will see over on the system. And we want to minimize that amount of crosstalk because as the signal degrades, as it goes farther and farther away, there's attenuation. The signal begins to get quieter and quieter as it goes down the line. And if it's 100 meters away, the crosstalk that was really bad close to us is going to be super difficult to be able to hear between these different wires when it gets to the other side. It just overloads everything. So if we can minimize that crosstalk, we can more effectively and efficiently send signals over a much longer distance over our Ethernet networks. This becomes quite a challenge. There's other types of crosstalk too. We could take a far end crosstalk. FEXT is where we would measure the crosstalk at the other end of the cable. And you might even want to do that to compare the differences. Is the amount of near-in crosstalk that we're seeing really affecting crosstalk at the other end? And if it is, how much is it affecting that crosstalk? We also have crosstalk that might come not from ourselves, but from aliens. Well, not aliens. It's from other cables that are on the network. We refer to this as alien crosstalk. Alien crosstalk, AXT, alien crosstalk, Mac. That is one that we also have with attenuation to crosstalk ratio so that you can determine for that crosstalk and attenuation that gets all the way across the network, what is the ultimate value of this? How did that crosstalk really affect us overall? And we can start comparing those ratios between different connections. Near-in crosstalk can become a definite problem, but one of the ways that you can prevent this near-in crosstalk is to be able to have a much better punch-down connection. And that's either a punch-down at a punch-down block, or it's the crimping that is on your cable. That is the answer that we were looking at here was to simply recrimp the connectors. That's what 16% of you chose. Recrimping the connectors usually solves all of your crosstalk problems. You are making sure that all of the twists stay in the wire all the way into that connector. You want to maintain those twists because twists help us minimize the amount of crosstalk and other types of interference that we will see on that particular link. So recrimping those connectors will be very useful. Another important aspect of this, by the way, is this is a copper cable issue. You don't have an issue with crosstalk if you have fiber because that's light. There's no light leaking over from one of the fibers into another. Light doesn't work that way, at least not as we think of it in the world of near and crosstalk anyway. So any of these answers that have anything to do with fiber, you can naturally dismiss. So for example, replacing multi-mode with single mode is referring to a fiber connection. We know if we're having a problem with near and crosstalk, it's not fiber. So you can throw out replace multi-mode with single mode. You can also replace out, generally speaking, clean the connectors with fiber connections. Before you plug them in on a permanent installation, you very often take some isopropyl alcohol and you clean the connector at the end because it's such a tiny little fiber. Even a minute amount of dust can affect the performance of that light coming through that signal. So we often will clean that connector and then plug it in to make sure that we have the cleanest, clearest light coming through that particular fiber. But since it is fiber, that is something that has nothing to do with near-in crosstalk. We have other answers here. The 41% of you, the plurality of you, said to verify continuity for all of the wires. Continuity is checking to make sure that pin 1 on one side of the cable is connected to pin 1 on the other side of the cable, and pin 2 on one side of the cable is connected to pin 2 on the other side of the cable, and we're sure that it goes from one end of the cable to the other without any breaks in between. That's what we refer to as continuity. That continuity is important so that all 8 wires are able to communicate from one end to the other, but simply having continuity doesn't tell you it tells you that you have a physical connection, but it doesn't tell you the quality of that physical connection. If you want to get quality of a connection, you're going to need a more advanced tool, usually a much more expensive tool, to be able to send those measurements over the wire, listen in at the crosstalk that we're getting, and listen in a way that can give you an accurate representation of what those values are. So in this case, verifying continuity doesn't help us troubleshoot anything related to near-in crosstalk. If continuity wasn't there, we probably wouldn't have any crosstalk because our wire's broken. So that would not be the answer we were looking for. We also have use a crossover cable. Again, our problem here is not connectivity. It's not that we're connecting two devices together that are very similar. It's not that we need to have some way to to switch over the transmit and the receive connections. In this case, near and crosstalk is referring to the quality of the crimping, the cable, and the components that we're using on this connection, which means re-crimping the connectors would be a very easy thing to do. It'd be a very easy way to make sure that it's not related to the connector. Only takes a minute or two, relatively inexpensive and easy to re-crimp those connectors. And then you can run your near and crosstalk test again and see if it gets any better. In this case, 16% of us got that answer correct. Re-crimping the connectors and knowing what to do in situations of high near-in crosstalk is one of the problems that you have to troubleshoot on the exam objectives. So I pulled this right out of the objectives. This is certainly something you should be familiar with, along with all of the other cable issues you might run into. Everything and every one of those types of issues from the exam objectives is listed in my video, section 5.2. The video name is Cable Issues, to be able to work with that. So if you are ever working through troubleshooting crosstalk, now you know why that is so important when working on a copper network. Well, as I mentioned, we have so much in this video course and in the exam objectives that have anything to do with networking. It is such a large number of objectives that it's important to be able to watch every single video, reference those objectives, and really have an understanding of how those objectives are applied on a normal corporate large-scale network, which is exactly what the Network Plus is designed to teach you. But that means you're going to need to know about protocols and port numbers and security and being able to subnet. And there's topology questions and wireless, and it just goes on and on and on, it seems. Fortunately, there are only, I say only, there are a finite number of videos, 87 videos as part of our Network Plus course. That's over 12 hours of content. And I would love it if you would watch every single one of those. But of course, sometimes we just don't have enough time to go through every single video. Do not worry. I've taken all of the important information from every single video and I put it into one single document. These are my N10-009 course notes. They have a table of contents that is all clickable, and every bit of text, every important graphic, all of the tables, everything from every video is in this set of course notes. These course notes are available not only in a digital PDF form, but also the same information in a physical edition. You can get both of those. In fact, if you buy the physical book on the network, let's see if I can find the same page that we're looking at here. If you find, there it is, if you find the physical book and you order that one, you have access to the digital book for free. You can download it immediately and start looking through it as you're waiting on your physical book to be delivered. This is something that is available on our website. You can find out more about our course notes and our entire success bundle at the link that you see on your screen. Head over to professormesser.com/NPCN. That's our Network Plus course notes. Maybe that will give you a little bit of extra study material that you can take along with you wherever you happen to go and be able to study and get up to date with all of the exam objectives, or simply follow along as you're going through the videos. That's why we created the notes to begin with. Our Network Plus course notes, professormesser.com/NPCN. Let's do some more questions, shall we? Next question on our list asks, a network management station will be receiving alarms and alerts from network devices. Which of the following port numbers should be enabled in the firewall? Well, you knew there would be a port number question in here somewhere. Your possible answers are 67, 636, 1433, 162, or 5060. All of these are port numbers you need to know for your exam, by the way. So, of course, all of these could possibly be the answer. Let's see which one really fits in this scenario. The question again asks, a network management station will be receiving alarms and alerts from network devices. Which of the following port numbers should be enabled in the firewall? Is it 67, 636, 1433, 162, or 5060? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is where I might want to pick up my course notes and have a look at all the port numbers. Don't cheat. No cheating. Do not look at the objectives. Do not Google these things. Do not go to the links. We can go right. Oh, I have a whole chart right there in my course notes that tells me every port number, every protocol, what they're associated with, and what they would be used for. That's not bad to be able to work through that. That might be something that helps you as well as you're going through all of these and trying to figure out what would be the right answer for something like this. And this is one that was added to, I don't know if it was added to the exam, but it certainly was part of the exam objectives for this latest version. So this might be a good one to work through. Let's see how you did. A lot of people answered this one quickly. That gives me a feel for maybe we got this one spot on. We bounced back from this one. The question again asks, a network management station will be receiving alarms and alerts from network devices. Which of the following port numbers should be enabled in the firewall? Is it 67, 636, 1433, 162, and 5060? Which one did you choose? Well, 44% of you say the answer is 162. We have 20% that say it's 5060. 13% say it's 636, 12% say 1433, and 10% say port 67. So we're going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to show you what I use to cross-reference these so we can figure out what these are. But first, let's talk about the port number this would be for using something like this. This process of receiving alarms and alerts from a network device is the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP. That SNMP is used often to proactively gather these statistics from a device. So we might have a management workstation down here, and we would query a device and say, how many bytes have been inbound to a particular interface over a particular amount of time? And it will give us a response. Oh, it's 210,506. And then on the network management station, we can log that information. We can create reports. We can get a dashboard of that information, and we can simply continue to query that. There are different versions of SNMP you need to be aware of. Version 1, version 2, and version 3. Might also be good to understand how to get information the other direction, because this scenario is one where the management station has to proactively query these devices to get an answer. Well, when problems happen, you need to be informed immediately. And you may be a case where you're not even querying that device to even see if there's something you need to be aware of. So there is a feature of SNMP referred to as an SNMP trap. Kind of an odd name. It's like an SNMP alarm. It's an SNMP alert, but we call it a trap. It's a way to receive reactive information or proactive information immediately from these remote devices. So the moment something goes wrong, it sends you an alarm. It sends you an alert. It lets you know something is going on. And it uses UDP port 162 to be able to do that. That is exactly where you should go with this one. So if you're someone who is working through port numbers, you're trying to figure out the details, all of this is contained within your exam objectives. So make sure you go to the objectives to get more information on these port numbers. It's really going to help you as you start stepping through the details. In fact, I have a copy of these objectives in front of me. Here they are, the Network Plus exam objectives. And if you look through it, section 1.4 explain common networking ports, protocols, services, and traffic types. All of the protocols you need to know are listed, and the port numbers associated with those are listed. And indeed, port 162 is the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP. That is the answer that we were looking for. That was the one associated with this particular question. Hopefully, and if you see on SNMP, that's exactly where that number came from. That's where we got that particular number. There were other port numbers listed in here as well. And one of the things that's important about this exam is these port numbers are important to know, but it's perhaps more important to know what they would be used for. And I think this is a really good example of the type of context that the exam is going to ask you about. Notice that it didn't ask you what port is used by SNMP traps or what port is used by an alarm with SNMP. It didn't give you any of that, but it did give you a scenario where you had to understand, oh, that's SNMP. Even better, that's an SNMP trap, therefore it's 162. and you had to put all of that together. There are other port numbers in this list. Port 67, commonly used with DHCP. And if you're doing dynamic host configuration protocol, that is a port number you will often see. Very easy to capture that one too, because they're usually sent across the network as UDP broadcasts. We also have 20% of you that said 5060. If you're doing any type of voice over IP, you're doing even video over IP, uses the session initiation protocol. That is a control protocol, a call setup and call teardown function. That is what is used to be able to originally connect to other devices on the network. It uses port 5060 to be able to do that. We have 13% that say 636. So if you are one of the folks that are typing in and working through a SQL database and you're connecting to a device, you need to authenticate with LDAP. All of these types of protocols are going to need to be used on your network. LDAP uses 636 to be able to query an LDAP database. If you're using a third-party product to do authentication to an Active Directory database, it probably is going to use LDAP to do that. So you'll probably see port 636 being used for that, or one of the more secure LDAP protocols, hopefully, on your network to be able to do that. We have 12% of you that say 1433. Another, I mentioned SQL earlier. 1433 is used by SQL Server. If you're a Microsoft person and doing SQL databases, that is the one that you would want to use for that. We're not doing SQL databases in this question. We're doing SNMP, so that would not be the answer we were looking for. And we have, did we cover all of them? I think we did. We did 162, 5060, 1433, 636, and 67. In this case, we were hoping to get SNMP, and 44% of you got that one absolutely right. As an SNMP, a simple network management protocol trap, uses port 162 to be able to do that. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that allows you to say that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That 1-hour category CEU is one that you can use to be able to apply towards a renewal. You might also use this for third-party functions as well. This is one where you have to follow these instructions to be able to earn the digitally signed email from me. The way that you would do that is you would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You would click the Contact Us link. In the Contact Us link, I would like you to put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2025 Network Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month. And people in the chat room are looking for clarification. The super secret code word is 636 LDAP-S for LDAP Secure. 636. LDAP Secure uses 636. LDAP, of course, 389. Another protocol, another port number we need to use. You need to know both the non-secure and the secure versions of LDAP and of HTTP and of other protocols as well. That is our super secret code words of the month, 636 LDAP-S. That's what we're looking for. You can simply send that to me. It takes me about a week to turn these around, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. That's what we would run into. So make sure you are familiar with that and being able to work through it. If you missed the instructions, they are very important. If you don't follow the instructions, you don't get the email. So the instructions, again, are very important. It's part of the process. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2025 Network Plus or something close to that, not being very picky there. And then lastly, put the super secret code words of the month, 636 LDAP-S or 636 LDAP Secure. I'll take either one of those. I'm not that picky. We're not getting this down to the letter. I just want the style. I need to know that you were here, and that's the way that you're going to tell me that you indeed were here for this one. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but let's do another question, shall we? I think we can fit one more into this list. This next question asks, a network administrator would like to change the name of the wireless network name displayed in the network selection menu. Which of the following would the administrator need to modify? Would they modify the service set identifier, the client certificate, the pre-shared key, the captive portal, or the ad hoc address? All of those are real things. Just doesn't sound like they're real things, but they are real things. You do need to know what all of those are, of course, but only one of them is the right answer. The question again asks, a network administrator would like to change the name of the wireless network name displayed in the network selection menu. Which of the following would the administrator need to modify? Would it be the service set identifier, the client certificate, the pre-shared key, the captive portal, or the ad hoc address? If you think you know the answer, there's your link on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. We'll figure out what this answer is. This is one that if you're working on a wireless network, there are a lot of bells and whistles and knobs and options to turn. You can improve performance of a wireless network by changing one parameter. You can also destroy the performance of a wireless network by changing one parameter. So you have to it basically applies to almost anything in networking, really. So you have to be very careful about the things that you choose to change. We mentioned earlier DNS. I think I could go into an access point and change some wireless settings and not worry about it too much because I can change them back and not have too much of a problem. I mentioned in our performance-based question, one of the things you should probably never connect to or change, or certainly have at an arm's length, is your DNS server. So anytime anybody ever tells you, I'll just make a change to your DNS, change this in your DNS, you should immediately start putting your hands up and go, oh, wait a second. We need to really understand what we're doing when we add that to the DNS. There are ways that you could effectively cripple IP addresses by putting in the wrong values in a DNS. It has happened before, not to me, thankfully. I've configured my DNS so that I can make changes on the fly, and those changes effectively go worldwide in 5 minutes. I think you should probably think about that too if you're working on it. A lot of people answered this one. I feel like we're going to finish strong. Let's see how we do. I have not peeked at the answer, so I have no idea what you chose for this one. The question asked, a network administrator would like to change the name of the wireless network name displayed in the network selection menu. Which of the following would the administrator need to modify? Would it be the service set identifier, the client certificate, the pre-shared key, the captive portal, or the ad hoc address? What did you choose? Let's close our poll and find out. 92% of you say the answer is service set identifier. We're all going to win, or we're all going to lose on this one, it looks like, because everything else is 4% for pre-shared key, 3% for ad hoc address, 2% for client certificate. It always makes me sad when something gets 0%. I try to build these in my mind to be very, very challenging, to be very, very difficult to parse together so that maybe half of you would get it right and half of you might get it wrong, but that gives us a chance to really talk about this. In this is one of those cases, though, where 92% spot on. It's exactly what we would change to be able to modify what that wireless name appears as when we click the list, that pull-down menu list of all the wireless networks that are on our network. Wireless networks have a number of different configuration parameters you need to worry about. One that is useful to know is the BSS ID of an access point. This is the basic service set identifier. That is really just a name to describe the physical address of that network interface card. This is that SSID, the basic SSID. It's effectively a MAC address. You want to look at it that way. And every access point has a different MAC address, just like every computer, every Ethernet adapter has a different MAC address as well. So that gives you an option to understand what access point it happens to be based on a physical address. So you can really narrow it down. Is it that one or that one? Oh, it's that one because I have the BSS ID. I know that's the BSS ID of that access point. Therefore, it must be that one. When you're dealing with wireless, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, especially when you start working through BSS IDs and having to change an access point, and you get up on a ladder and you go all the way up the ceiling and you pull the access point out, and then you realize, oh, wait, this is the wrong one. This is a different BSS ID. So you do need to make sure your documentation is good. The other thing that we need to know about is the SSID. This SSID is effectively the name of the wireless network, and that SSID could be shared across multiple access points. In fact, very often is when you have multiple access points, so that you can move from one end of the building to the other. You're moving from one access point on one end of the building to an access point on the other end of the building. And if both of those configurations are identical to each other, then you would seamlessly roam from one access point to the other. You don't even know that you switched to a different BSSID because everything else is exactly the way it should be. That's what you should really be looking for when you're working through all of this. And if you are connecting these together in a mode where you can move from one to the other, it's the extended service set that we need to worry about. The SSID is connected together in multiples of these SSIDs through an extended service set. It's what we refer to that, and being able to work through multiple access points all at the same time. This means that we can take our mobile device, which we clearly have not upgraded because we still have the button, and we can move to a different part of the building, and it will simply identify, oh, you've moved. Well, let's connect you on that network. You have no idea that anything ever changed along that particular connection. It just all happened perfectly seamlessly. You have no idea that you're on a different access point. So the answer here indeed was the 92% of you that said service set identifier. That was the answer that we wanted to see. 4% of you said pre-shared key. That is the key that is often associated with access points that would be maybe at a home office where there's no centralized authentication server. Instead of having an authentication server, we just give everybody the password at our house. So Ninja1 is our password. If you come into our house, Ninja1 connects you to our network, and that's our pre-shared key. We have 3% of you that said an ad hoc address. Ad hoc is a way to connect access points or really network devices together without an access point. We can connect to it ad hoc. It's one that allows us to communicate between devices and not have to worry about configurations of an access point. You might not even have an access point. You can still communicate between wireless devices directly between each other using ad hoc wireless networking. 2% of you said client certificate. Client certificates are useful to put on a device. They are a cryptographic certificate that has been digitally signed by your certificate authority, which verifies that that certificate really belongs to the organization. And if you're putting that certificate on a laptop, then the only way that would have happened is if the laptop is supported by the organization. It's a great way to remotely identify a device as being trusted because it has one of these client certificates. Has nothing to do with wireless network, however. Only 2% of you chose that one. And then 0% of you chose captive portal. Nobody chose captive portal. I put it in there because this is something that you often see when you connect to a wireless network for the first time. It pops open a screen that says, welcome to the coffee shop network. Put in the code of the day to be able to communicate across on the network. And you may even have to check a box saying that you agree to the terms and conditions for using this wireless network. That box that pops up, that screen that pops up that you must get through is a portal, and you are captive to that portal. You must complete that portal setting to be able to then be allowed access to the network. Very common to see on wireless networks, but doesn't have to be on a wireless network. Something that does help quite a bit if you're doing captive portals. Well, that was the answer we were looking for. Service set identifier. You crushed it. You completely annihilated my question. I will never ask this question again. You've now got me to the point where I'm retiring the question and working through there. Well, all of the things that we saw today, all the things we talked about, all the port numbers and next and security issues and everything that we did was not something I made up. It's not something that I thought you should know. It's something that CompTIA thinks you should know. And they think you should know this so much that they put it into a document called their exam objectives. These exam objectives contain every bullet, every bit of text, every topic, everything that you're working on that has anything to do with the Network Plus exam. Anything in this list could be asked of you during the exam, which means, here's the upside, if you know all of these bullets, you know all of these objectives, you're going to do great on the exam. You're going to crush it. You're not going to have a problem at all. So use this as your checklist. It is a fantastic checklist. You can find this over on the CompTIA website. They've recently changed their website around, so it's a little bit more difficult to find this particular information, but it is there. It's in a red box. In fact, I should probably just show you, right? Because this is a visual medium. We could probably just pop open a page and go to the CompTIA website. There it is. Here's our CompTIA website. And if we go to certifications right here on the top, it lists out a summary of these. Let's go to all certifications. So here's every certification or certificate that CompTIA offers in the world. And if we were to look at this, we can go down to the Network Plus section because we are working on the Network Plus exam. And it shows you a summary of the objectives, but we need to know more than this. And if you keep scrolling down and scrolling down, just underneath, there's a red box and it says, get Network Plus exam objectives and practice questions. They'll give you a couple of those. Put your email address in there. You agree to the privacy notice. You click access now. Let's do this. Let's put in my address. I'm going to switch over here. So you see James at professormesser.com. You're welcome to send me a note. So I'm going to put in my email address. I'm going to click I agree to the privacy notice, and we'll click access now. And when we do that, all of these links come up so that you can go to the English version of the Network Plus exam objectives, and it will download those objectives. Hey, there they are. Same objectives we were just looking at. So that is exactly how you get your hands on detailed objectives that include a huge list of acronyms and maybe even information and things that you might want to use for your studies, all in the exam objectives, and it's free, as you just saw. I didn't have to pay anything to get my hands on those objectives. That is a valuable study tool. You need to make sure you get your hands on that as well. And of course, that is exactly the same set of objectives I use to create every single video. In fact, you may be looking at the objectives and you're putting them side by side with the video and thinking, this is exactly the same. Yep, it's designed that way. That is not a trick. It is not something that I stumbled into. That was done intentionally. So I find the objectives incredibly valuable. Hopefully you will find them valuable as well. Now, we do one of these study groups every month. The next study group for Network Plus, notice November is kind of weird. Normally we do these study groups and they're staggered throughout the month. But as things are in my life, there's chaos that surrounds me. And the chaos requires me to fit 3 study groups in the same week of November. Not only that, we have to deal with here in the U.S., we have our Thanksgiving at the end of November. We just had Thanksgiving for Canada. So this is one where you will see A+ on November 17th, A+ on November 19th. That's the Core 1 and Core 2. Network Plus on November the 21st. And we're going to fit Security Plus in the week of Thanksgiving on November the 25th. If you can't make it, don't worry. Everything will be recorded. You can always watch the replays on our YouTube channel. If those dates change, you will find that they are updated over on our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Another nice thing to know that I update that calendar the instant things change. Hopefully this won't change. I think this one's pretty well locked in, but the moment I say that is the moment everything changes. So I never said that. I never mentioned it. Don't tell anyone I said that. We're going to keep these dates. I think we'll be all right. If not, well, you can say, I told you so. You're welcome to do that. Well, the first hour is over, but we are not done yet. I still have questions that you have submitted that we will be going through in our after show. Anything you want to know about technology, about certifications, about IT, or about anything, you're welcome to ask that in the after show. Simply submit your question anytime at professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our success bundle, our course notes, and more. Find it at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have our voucher discounts. These can be significant discounts. You could save quite a bit of money. So make sure you check out what those options might be at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, if you're on the internet, so are we. Go to your favorite social media site. We're probably there as well. Find us at professormesser.com/Discord/X/YouTube/Instagram/Facebook. There's a lot of others out there too. If you think you're trying to find us, you think you'd like to find us online, that's a great way to find out where we are by putting in any of those particular links. Well, that brings us to the end of our first hour, but we're not done yet. Stick around for our after show. Thank you so much for joining us. We always have so much fun in this first hour doing the Q&A, and you guys did a great job today. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, now's the time on the study group where I take a sip. One moment, please. Oh, that's so much better. Then we move this over and we get rid of that. There we are. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the after show. This is the part of the event that I have literally done no preparation for because I don't know what questions you're going to ask until you ask them. So I now am going to go back to my Vevox, which is what we have been using this whole time for these questions. And I am going to give you a screen here. Let's see if I can get things going here. It's always a challenge sometimes for me to get this going. You can submit questions for this second hour of this study group at any time. So we will be moderating the questions on the back end. So when you submit the question, it just doesn't appear on the screen. I will be looking at them to see what options might be available, see what things you might be talking about, questions that you might have. It's a great thing to submit. You can put that in at any time using that link that is on your screen. So now's the time where I have to do a little bit of work. We're going to go over to your questions and see what options are there to be able to work through it. So let's see what questions you might have. So let's talk about what options might be available, the things that we're working on, the questions you have about doing things. And the first one I would like to go through is right at the top of my list that was submitted very early on in the study group. Thank you for submitting this. This is a question not just from Chuck. It's Big Chuck. Big Chuck says, I've worked in the help desk for 2 years, and my company is having me get Network Plus. By the way, Big Chuck, this is a good sign. Anytime they want you to get a certification, sounds like they need more networking people. So this is great. Chuck says, is it just me, or do most real-world companies and departments not really do everything by the books? When it comes to troubleshooting methods, security standards, change management, and other things, we really don't do it the way CompTIA tells you to. We're a large company and take IT seriously, but wonder how much you could realistically be expected to uphold everything from the exam in a real job. Well, I can speak to this certainly. Part of the things that I've done in my career is to be someone who visits multiple companies a day to talk to their networking professionals and their security professionals, sometimes 3 and 4 companies a day. So I have seen probably the widest variation of different types of companies, vertical markets. I've been in transportation companies. I've been in breweries. I have been in car manufacturing facilities. I've been in nuclear power plants. I have been in transportation scenarios, in train control centers. I've been in financial environments. I've been in some of the largest data centers in the world. My focus was on large-scale networking and large-scale cybersecurity. And I designed and implemented many of those solutions for those types of networks. So the question Chuck has is, what we say in our videos seems to be different than what we're doing in our companies. This is not entirely beyond the realm of possibility. A lot of what you see, almost everything you see in the Network Plus, Security Plus, A Plus, and most of these industry certifications are the best practices for these organizations. So they are what you should be doing. They're the things that most of us agree is the best way to do it. But that doesn't mean that everybody does every single process as a best practice. In fact, sometimes you're not able to use the best practice because of the way that a certain piece of software operates, or because the organization has never implemented the best practice. And it becomes, as I mentioned this in my change control video, once a company gets in a mode of doing things, it is very hard to change this. And the bigger the company, the more difficult it is to make one of these process or procedural changes. It's almost like driving a cruise ship. You can't just turn it on a dime. You have to get everybody involved on the bridge. We have to turn the wheel, and then it takes a while for the ship to finally make the turn. It takes a long time. Sometimes, well, with the cruise ship, we know it's going to turn. Sometimes in these big companies, we come up with a plan, a process and procedure for best practices, but somebody's blocking it. There's politics in every organization. Someone once told me, I was fussing about, I wish we could get rid of all these politics. Get rid of the politics and we fix everything, which I guess is the technician's mind. I think if you get rid of the personalities, everything would be great. But that's indeed not the way things work. And a very smart person I was working with said, he was my boss at the time, said, well, guess what? You're never going to get rid of politics. It's never going away. It is what we have to deal with as part of the human condition. So because of that, your best path would be to understand and work through the politics that exist, because you're just not going to be able to get rid of it. And complaining that it's there doesn't help anything. You still need to find a way to get this job done. So I think Big Chuck is probably running into a little bit of this. Big Chuck, especially because Chuck says, we're a big company. We are a large company and take IT seriously. Yep, but sometimes it's difficult to make those changes. Everything you're reading about in these presentations is best practice. And I know this because I got to see a lot of different networks and understand what the best practices might be. There's a reason we would want to do it with the best practice. And I think some of these are relatively obvious. Change control is a perfect example of that. I have been in environments where change control was a Bible. It was the contract that everyone must go with, you must agree to, you must follow. And if you do not follow change control, we could fire you. That is grounds for dismissal. If you go in and you make a change to a switch and nobody knew you were making the change, you just make the change really quick. Click. Somebody found out you did that in those types of environments, you'd be out. Sorry, you're loose cannon. Can't have you here. You could make one change and destroy everything that we've got here. You could bring the network down, cost us a lot of money, cost us a lot of problems. We don't need you here. I've been in other environments where that's the way you worked. There was no change control. Whenever there was a change that needed to be made, I'll make that. Yeah, we're in the meeting. We need to think about how we might want to configure port security on our switches. We should start using port security. Okay, we'll do that right now. Click, 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 click. Click the keyboard. Yeah, I just turned it on in the core switch. That's just what they do. It's just a normal part of doing this. Whenever I would go around with my next generation firewall, there'd be often times where we might want to put it in a link that was physically between two devices, which means you would have to break a connection and put the firewall in between. The firewall effectively ran at layer 1. And there what I would refer to as two different interfaces on the firewall, a Gazinda port and a Gazata port. That was the extent of the configuration. So it was a very simple config, but it required you to break a connection, which means you lost signal, and you put this in the middle. In some environments, you couldn't do that. Change control. You can't break a connection, put a firewall, some third-party firewall in the middle that we're evaluating. Other places I would go, looking at you, K through 12s and state and local government, they go, oh yeah, we can break that. Clunk, break it, stick it in between. Now, the reality is I had configured the firewall so that it would only have a 1 second downtime. You disconnect, you connect it in, and you're good. But any downtime is bad, even a 1 second downtime. And it could certainly cause a problem when you did that. So that is another situation where you're really having to deal with understanding why you have a best practice, why we're telling you this is the process you should do. Does everybody do it that way? They do not. They should. They probably should consider it and be able to implement it. Sometimes there are many reasons why you don't. Sometimes there are technical reasons you don't implement the changes that way, or you don't have a process for that. Other times it's people is your biggest problem. Both of those are things to consider, but knowing how to do it right is super important, because when somebody does it wrong, you know they did it wrong or they're doing it the wrong way. And then you understand where that gap is between why are we doing it this way and why are we not implementing it the right way. So another thing that you might want to consider as you are going through this world of standards, processes, best practices, it's an important consideration. Let's keep going through our list and find out what other questions you might have. Let's talk about getting a job or getting a better job. That's a huge part of why we made these courses. The only reason we have these out on the internet, the only reason we spend the time making these, the only reason we do these live streams is to get you a job or get you a better job. That's our focus. So Michael W. asks, if you were to hire someone for an entry-level role, help desk, IT support, etc., what keywords would you look for in or on a resume? It's kind of sad we have to think about getting a job as keywords, but that is indeed the world that we live in right now. Very often when you submit a resume, a human being does not look through that resume to begin with. Usually it is a process that is automated that looks through your resume, looks for different pieces of information, and only if you pass what that particular automated process believes is the right information on that resume will they send it on to a human to be looked at. Well, that puts us at a bit of a disadvantage over the way we used to do it. That is a bit of a challenge. Sometimes the algorithm they choose to use is super good, and it will really pick out the right ones. Have we ever seen that, though? It's very rare. That is an unusual one that is done properly. But this is one of those scenarios where you might run into a scenario where you want to be able to get that resume in front of someone. So there's a couple of ways I'll approach this particular question and give you a number of different things you might want to consider. First, I would highly recommend you watch our video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's in the YouTube video description of this video. So you can look at it right now. Well, not right now, but when we're done here, have a look at the YouTube video description. Watch that video. It's a 30-minute video, but I go through 4 different elements that are super important when you're trying to get that first job in the industry. And all of them are good. You may be able to take advantage of all of them. You may not. But we talk a lot about resumes. I also have in that YouTube video description, I think I have my resume videos in there too. 5 reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. And another video, 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. That probably speaks directly to this particular question from Michael. And I talk about what that automated process is, things that are important, and ways that you can focus your resume. Here's the way that most people, I think, worry about resumes and being able to work through them. They create a resume. They have somebody check the resume. They've worked on every single section of the resume. They get it exactly the way they want. And then they blast this resume out to everybody who has a job posting. That is probably the worst possible use of a resume. The resume is there so that the person advertising the position can see what credentials you match with for that particular job. And in my video on getting a job in IT, or maybe it was the one on the resumes, especially for resumes that are getting rejected, have a look at those videos. I talk about the need of customizing your resume for the job. And when I put the video out, this was a number of years ago, people sort of scoffed at that idea. Why would I spend time on every single job posting to customize this resume just to be able to make it more palatable to the human that's watching it? Well, I guess that's a fine argument. That's not a bad argument, but I think having a more refined resume when that human looks at it is a much better place to be. But now we don't have humans looking at these resumes. For the vast majority of them, I would expect we're having a machine do it. What better reason to customize your resume? And I talk about in the video, take the job description that is posted, the job posting that you see. There will be a list of credentials they're looking for. There will be a list of things they would like this person to be able to do. And they probably have a list of things in that job posting that's required for this person to know. There's your list. There's your keywords. You should make sure that if those particular functions, those particular knowledge points on that job posting are things that you know about, they should go at the top of your resume. They should be the first thing that automated process sees so that they can see if they were asking for the Security Plus certification, you should have that at the top. If they're asking about a knowledge of Active Directory, you should have that at the top. If they're asking about how to manage and configure a switched network, that should be at the top of your resume. So that's one of those scenarios where customizing your resume becomes super important, and getting through that first step But perhaps even more importantly, once you make it through the first step, now the person looking at your resume sees those at the top. And as you've probably seen the statistics on humans looking at resumes, they spend seconds looking at every resume that comes through. They've got 50 resumes in front of them. You can't spend a lot of time going through these resumes. They're going to look at it for a number of seconds. And then at that point, be able to determine if that's a resume that goes in the keep pile or the not keep pile. You want to be in the keep pile. You want to be in the one that they come to later to really spend more time going through your resume, maybe reaching out to you, talking more on a phone call or in a Zoom connection. That is the next step. But it requires you to be able to customize your resume to match the job posting. And I would highly recommend you do that, along with creating a cover letter. I think cover letters are great. There's a style of cover letter I mentioned. I think it's in the second resume video, 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected, where I talk about the T style format. T. So timeout. That's what we're talking about. The T style of a cover letter. What you don't want a cover letter to be is a generic letter that you just attach to the front and send it on, because that has the same effect as the generic resume you created that will not be able to make it through the keyword filter. So your cover letter is an opportunity for you to tell that hiring manager why you are perfect for this role. And so here's what you don't want the cover letter to be. To whom it may concern. Thank you for allowing the submission of this resume for the jobs that you have posted online. We look forward to hearing from you regarding my credentials and time that I have, blah, blah. There's nothing in there that anyone wants to know about. That is the worst possible generic, pointless, empty, vapid type of cover letter. Nobody wants that. Do not spend your time creating one of those. Do not send one of those with your resume. Relatively worthless. What you want is the T style, where you effectively put on the left side of the T, you put all of the things the employer is looking for in their job posting. And on the right side of the T, you put all of the credentials that you have or the knowledge that you have that matches what they're looking for. So you're almost just putting all the keywords into one document, if you will. It's a great way to get through keyword filters, and it's a great way to present yourself to someone who is hiring. How many people do you think are doing a T-style cover letter? I bet not a lot. So it is already differentiating you during this process. And when you are working on an entry-level role where there are so many people putting in their resumes for this particular position, you need to differentiate yourself. I've heard of people doing different things. I've heard of people next day air their resume to a hiring manager. And it comes in that FedEx envelope. You have to tear off the top of the envelope and take out the resume. What a way to deliver the resume. There was one I saw recently where somebody delivered it with a pizza. So the pizza showed up, their resume attached to it. They were actually the delivery driver in that scenario. They delivered a pizza that had their resume on it. Well, it's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue with pizza. So there's different things you might want to try. There's different things that would differentiate you. Find the one that works best for you and get in front of the hiring manager. The last, just a spoiler alert with my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. The last element that I have in that video is you know someone who works there. How often do you think people are submitting resumes to companies where they know someone who works there? I'll bet not a lot, especially for entry level. So I talk about in the video, how do you meet these people? Is there any scenario when you would be able to meet somebody at one of these companies you want to work for and be able to use that as during the hiring process itself? It actually is very, very easy to do. In fact, wouldn't it be great if the person you met at the company was the one that sent your resume in? Happens all the time, and for a lot of very good reasons. So have a look at that video. That might help you quite a bit in being able to do that. And there are still people out there that are really taking the time to go through the resumes manually and really find the right people. I think that number may be increasing actually, because we are in the Gartner hype curve. AI is, I think, heading down into that trough of disillusionment. We've now suddenly realized, wow, the consumerish type of face that has been put to AI is very, very bad. It's not very good at customer service. It's very bad at solving problems. It doesn't work very well to get us answers on a web page. It's just not, AI doesn't work that well. Now with large data sets, being able to look through and correlate across multiple databases, being able to do medical research, AI shines. It's fantastic for doing that because you have so much data that you have to sift through. And if you need a picture of a dog on a boat sipping a martini, I guess AI is good for that as well. I've really had no need for that at this point. But there are ways that you could really take advantage of those. And I think many people are really working through and trying to find the best way to use this. The problem is that a lot of these big companies, those have spent billions of dollars on this AI implementation that has turned out to be just a mess. I guess maybe it's a tax write-off though, right? There's an upside. There's always a silver lining. Maybe that's the silver lining for them. Let's do another question. Let's keep going through this list of them. This is from Michael, who says, hey, do you plan on doing any Core 2 CompTIA A+ study groups anytime soon? It was last week. You just missed it, Michael. You were just there. But we have both a Core 1 and a Core 2 study group that we do every month. Usually they're a couple days apart. But fortunately, no harm, no foul. There's a replay. We have an entire YouTube playlist, and we also have a page on our website for all of our study group replays, both for A+ Core 1 and A+ Core 2, so that you know you won't miss anything in that list. Yep. And in fact, if you go back, back to the previous versions of the A+ exam, you'll see that we've been doing Core 1 and Core 2 study groups, well, quite literally for years, having all of those there. I think it's useful to split those into separate study groups so that we have one study group for the first core and a completely different study group where we can focus on the Core 2 objectives. Let's keep going through this list. Such great questions today, by the way. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do it through the link that is on your screen right now, professormesser.com/QA. So let's, okay, here is a pretty good one. We've been talking about AI. Well, this is a question from AI. Not really AI. I think this is a human who put in their name as capital A, space, capital I. AI says, hello, professor. I got A+ certified right before September 25th. That means for those of you not familiar with the deadlines for A+, the previous A+ series retired last month on the 25th. So that is a very good example of getting it in just under the wire. Well done. This continues. Your videos and practice exams were very helpful. Thank you so much for that feedback, and we're glad that it was able to help you with this. I live in the Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland area. After some research, I noticed most government employers ask for a Security Plus cert. My question is, do I need Network Plus before jumping into Security Plus? Is the A+ knowledge recently acquired enough to go to Security Plus? And which one is more difficult, Network Plus or Security Plus? So let's talk about geography. Let's talk about where in the world is Carmen Sandiego and where in the world is AI. In this case, A, can I call you A? I see that you are in the Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland area. For those of you that are familiar with the inner workings of the United States government, all of our federal government, the seat of our federal government is in Washington, D.C., which is surrounded by Virginia and Maryland. So a lot of the federal government jobs and companies that work with the federal government, they might be private companies working with the federal government, are also located very often in the Northern Virginia, Maryland area. One of the other things that is very common for federal government positions, as AI has already mentioned, is that this is a huge number of jobs asking for Security Plus. They don't ask for A Plus. They don't ask for Network Plus. They ask for Security Plus. That is the entry-level certification for the federal government, or one of the entry-level certifications that they look for. It's probably one of the more popular entry-level certifications that they look for. The argument being, of course, that if you're going to deal with data in the federal government, you need to understand how to protect that data, how to keep that data safe. So that's what you'll find in that geography. If you happen to be in that section of the United States, a lot of the jobs are going to say Security Plus. Now, if you go to Chicago, or you go to Minneapolis, or you go to Dallas, or you go to LA, you go to Seattle, go somewhere else in the country, you may find that the job postings in those areas are not quite as Security Plus centric. And that's because as you move into different geographies, you will find that different skills are required. And usually these are kind of what they do to be able to get the right people for those jobs in that particular market. And so one of the things I mentioned in my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience is research. Research is so important. Before you even send a resume, you have to understand the market in your area. So one of the things I mentioned is to get a spreadsheet going. If you've never worked with a spreadsheet, now's your time. Google Sheets is fantastic for this because it's free and it's available and it's in the cloud. Google Sheets, you can create a spreadsheet where you find every job in your local area that you feel that you are qualified for. That's an important part of this. Don't pick jobs that are looking for somebody that has 10 years of experience. You're not looking for those cybersecurity jobs right out of the gate. There are very few entry-level cybersecurity jobs, relatively speaking. So these security jobs that are out there generally are not the entry level. So find the jobs you would work for. If this is entry level, find help desk positions, service desk, field service technician. Maybe you could find an entry level position into a SOC, a security operations center, or even an entry level position into a NOC, a network operations center. So all of those would be great entry level jobs. Find all of the ones in your area and then start finding out what type of formal education do they want us to have? What type of non-formal education do they want us to have, especially industry certifications? Are they looking for industry certs? And if so, what certs do they want you to have? What type of skills are they looking for? Maybe they are listing specific software or a specific personal set of skills. Maybe there's a communication skill they would like to have. Maybe they're looking for someone who is bilingual, for example. These are things you should put into your spreadsheet so that you can now, that's one job. Now let's find another one and let's put that job into the spreadsheet. Now let's find a third one. Let's put all that information into the spreadsheet. Then when you're done, you should have 10, 15, 20 jobs listed there. Do you see any correlations between these jobs? Do you see certain skills they're asking for a lot? Do you see certain certifications that are constantly popping up? In the case of A, you're in the DC area, a lot of Security Plus, not unexpected. I often mention that in these study groups, is that Security Plus is super common for that particular part of the world, probably more common than other parts of the United States. So it's very unusual to find that level of emphasis in Security Plus if you're trying to get a job in Minneapolis, for example. So very, very different. However, you might run across in Minneapolis a federal contractor. The federal contractor wants you to have Security Plus. So you sometimes will run into those scenarios too. So A spent a lot of time getting their A+, which I think is a great foundational certification to have. You learn a lot when you go through the A+ certification. You learn about hardware. You learn about operating systems. It's a great primer to what we do here in the IT industry. The question, though, is do you need, since you're in DC, you're going to need to get that Security Plus. That's what I'm taking from your question. Do you need to get Network Plus before getting Security Plus? There's no formal prerequisites for any of these certifications. CompTIA does not gatekeep any of them. If you wanted to start with Security Plus, you could start with Security Plus. You don't have to get any of the others to schedule and take that particular exam. Is the A+ knowledge enough to go to Security Plus, or do you need any particular knowledge to go to Security Plus? And you don't. There are a lot of people in the DC area that are taking our Security Plus courses. Those people, that's their first cert. They don't even have A+ yet. They don't have Network Plus. They're probably not going to get Network Plus. And in the case of a federal environment, they might not even get A plus either because the employers there are not asking for A plus. They're asking for Security Plus. So in that scenario, in Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area, you're probably going to start with Security Plus. Perfectly normal. And I think if you have not gone through A plus, you've not gone through Network Plus, you will need to learn the things in Security Plus that happen to match some of the objectives of those, but you're going to need to know those anyway. So it's not a huge hindrance if you haven't gone through A plus or Network Plus. You would be able to jump right into Security Plus and simply use the same learning process that you used for A plus to do that. The question that is the last one on here, which is, which one of these is more difficult, Network Plus or Security Plus? These are two very different exams with two different, very different sets of exam objectives. And from a difficulty perspective, I kind of put them in the same difficulty level. You know, a forward pike is a forward pike, has the same difficulty level no matter who would be doing that particular dive. But in this case, Network Plus is a very different set of objectives than Security Plus. So you're learning different things, but I think the difficulty level is very similar between both of them. I think the same processes that you would use to study for Network Plus is probably very similar to the processes you use for Security Plus. However, Security Plus tends to be more process and concept oriented, and Network Plus has a little bit more technical detail to it. But I think the difficulty level is similar between all of those. Neither one of those is going super deep, but you still need to understand what those objectives are. So make sure you're familiar with those. And if nothing else, go grab the exam objectives for both, and you will be able to see what the differences are between those two exams and see what the difficulty level might be. I think it's perfectly reasonable to jump right into Security Plus if you're in that DC area, because that is going to be one of those credentials that everybody is asking for. And in some ways, that is a restriction. If you don't have Security Plus, you may not qualify for a number of jobs in your particular area. So if you're in DC, go get your Security Plus. Don't stop anywhere else. Go straight to Security Plus. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go directly to Security Plus. That is what I recommend. And I think that a lot of people would recommend that as well for someone who is in the DC area. Now, if you're not in DC, there may be a different set of certs somebody's looking for. The recommendation I give to someone in Washington, DC will be very different than a recommendation I would give to somebody in Los Angeles. So take that as it is given. Make sure you do the research in your area, wherever you happen to live in the world, and that way you'll know what you should be working on to best match what employers are looking for. Let's keep going through the list. Let's keep going down the line to other questions that we have here. There's a lot here that we would break down. Such great questions you've been sending in. Thank you so much for doing this, by the way. So we'll see what we have that is on this list. There's a lot that's here. A lot of questions have come in about Network Plus, about being able to work through the Network Plus objectives. I think, in fact, Anonymous really summarized it quite well and said, do you think it would be helpful to go through each item on the Network Plus objectives and write down the definition for every single thing on there? It doesn't even have to be written down. I think that is a good strategy, though. I think if you can explain every objective on that list to yourself or to someone else, then you're looking at the right thing. You're working through the right information. So, for example, let's go through an example of this right now and see if we can do this. Let's have a look at the Network Plus exam objectives. We start with domain 1.0 of the 5 domains on Network Plus. This is the first domain, which consists of multiple subdomains within it. 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8. That is the first domain of Network Plus. 1.1 says, explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, OSI, reference model. And they list out here, layer 1 is physical. Data 2 is data link. Layer 3 is network. 4 is transport. Then we have session, presentation, and application ends up being layer 7. This OSI model is a very common language we use in our networking industry to describe things that we're working on, things that we're trying to troubleshoot. We put everybody at the same place. Even if you don't know the specific protocol, you know that it's a layer 3 issue. Even if you don't know the application use, you know it's a layer 7 problem. That's how we use this OSI model. So you would need to know what this is referring to. You would need to know each one of these layers. That's certainly helpful. And you would need to have a kind of a broad overview as to what is associated with each individual layer. If you can describe that to yourself or to someone else, if you can write that down, whatever works for you to be able to properly memorize this, that's the important part of it. So go through section 1, do all of that, get it down so that you know what this OSI model is, and then you can go to section 1.2. Compare and contrast networking applications, appliances, applications, and functions. So they have router, switch, firewall, IDS, IPS, load balancer, proxy, NAS, SAN, wireless access point, wireless controller, a content delivery network, a virtual private network, a quality of service, and time to live. That's a lot of stuff and a lot of abbreviations as we start working it through this. So you would need to go through, what is a router? We've heard that term forever, right? Have you rebooted your router? Well, what does that mean? What is it doing? How does it work? What does it use to route with? You need to know these things for the exam. Then once you know that, you can go to switch. How does a switch operate? What is it looking for? When we're looking at how a switch is able to determine where traffic is going, how does it determine that? That's what you need to know. Next on our list is firewall. So you keep going through this list bullet by bullet by bullet, which, by the way, you notice that's exactly what we do in our videos. We take each one of these bullet by bullet and give you an overview. We give you the exact overview you need to know for this particular exam. So when you finish all of 1.2, you know all of these devices, these applications, and these functions, and you know how they're used, when they're used, and how it fits into the overall technology within the network. Next in your list, 1.3, and we're just going to keep going. So just keep doing that over and over. This seems like it would be a lot. It is. There's a lot here. Did I mention there's over 80 videos and 12 hours of content in this course? That's why. And that's just to tell you about it. It's probably going to be pausing, making notes, understanding, watching the rest of the video, and then somehow repeating this back so that you know it's good. But since this is in a PDF, you can even use this as your study reference. So in fact, it's an open PDF. So I'm going to grab the green color. And once I get a particular topic done, I can kind of highlight it and say, yep, those two topics are good. You know, I didn't get layer 3 very well. I sort of know it, but for layer 3, let's mark layer 3 and layer 4 as maybe yellow. I need to come back to those. And then maybe if you don't know it at all, you can mark it as red. Or maybe you've printed this out and you use a pen or a pencil and you make those notes. Either way works. Maybe you have a stylus on your computer and you can write on this particular screen. Whatever works for you. Find the way that works the best for you for these studies. And that's going to be a great way to know how to get through these exams, how to understand what you need to know for the exam itself. I think it would be super helpful to go through the objectives, write down everything you think is important, and be able to remember and tell someone else, because it's effectively what you're doing on your exam. Let's get through into some more questions here before we hit the top of the hour. We've quite a bit. So I talked earlier in the study group about these continuing education unit credits. I gave you an explanation, a set of processes to go through to be able to receive that email. Andy asks, okay, what do we do with that? What good is this thing? Is this something we use? It is. So if you don't know what a CEU is, you probably don't need it. Once you become A+ Network Plus, Security Plus certified, you have one of those certifications, or maybe even a third-party certification in your pocket, you need to be able to maintain that certification. The CompTIA certifications will expire 3 years after you pass your exam. So if you passed your exam today, you passed your Network Plus exam today, that certification would be good for 3 years. At the end of the 3 years, that certification would no longer exist. It is an X certification. You no longer have a certification, which is why during that 3-year period, you might want to consider renewing the certification so you don't lose all this time and effort that you've put into earning this cert. And there are many different ways to renew your certification. You can take the CertMaster CE and renew your certification in just a day. You could take a higher level exam. So if you're Network Plus certified, if you take your Security Plus exam and you pass it, it renews Network Plus and A Plus. There's a list of these on the CompTIA site so you know what certification renews what. That's another way to renew. You could take the exam again. It's not really a renewal though, is it? That's just taking the exam again. And another way to do it is to collect a series of continuing education unit credits that you can then apply towards a renewal. And this is one of the many renewal credits that you would need to be able to renew. So I would recommend, if you want to know how to use that CEU, head over to the CompTIA website. There's a section on continuing education, and they talk all about all of the different ways to renew, all of the different things that you can use to be able to renew your certification, and tell you what type of CEUs would be useful for that renewal process. So another thing that might help, I don't just hand out these CEUs because I can. I do it because a lot of people are collecting them to earn that renewal, although you don't have to. I think fewer and fewer people are renewing with CEUs these days. It's so easy to use a CertMaster CE and do it in a day. So it's a good example to figure out how that would work through. There's a lot of questions that have come up in here. We talked a little bit about AI earlier and how is AI going to take over networking? Is AI going to take over IT? Will we ever have a job again? You know, those are the questions that people are asking. And I think as we found recently, the idea of AI taking over jobs that are highly technical is not working out for almost any organization. AI has not turned out to be very useful in that it is artificial, but there's just not a lot of intelligence there. It's more like A. We've spent billions of dollars to provide you with automation and animation and something that would be at least a way to automate and script. AI has gotten really good at providing you with options, but not very good at actually solving the problem. I mentioned earlier that that Gartner, which is an industry analyst company, and they have a huge presence in the IT industry. They have something called a hype curve, a hype cycle, and this can be applied towards many different technologies, not just AI. I'm not bashing AI. AI has its place, but I think the ideas that we were presented, and we, for some reason, continue to be presented with AI, never came to fruition. So Gartner created this hype curve that applies to technology, where there is a technology trigger at the beginning of the curve, and that trigger in this particular case was AI. And everybody was saying, oh, guess what? None of us will ever work again. There will never be another technology job ever because AI, let's just fire everyone and AI will do everything for us, which we were all sitting around thinking, how is that going to work? Exactly. Because right now we tried it and it's barely able to tell me the time, much less anything highly technical. And would you release AI onto someone's network and just have it start changing router configurations? The answer is no, you would not. So what we hit was this peak of inflated expectations where companies literally are spending billions of dollars to implement AI. I think it's a bad bet. And in fact, most people have realized this is a really bad bet. This is a bad use of our money. And now we've started to see the curve come back down again, and eventually we'll hit the trough of disillusionment. I love the description of the hype curve, by the way, this hype cycle. The trough of disillusionment is what we're heading down to, probably at a very rapid pace. Eventually it's going to bottom out and people will go, well, AI wasn't everything we thought it would be, but maybe we can find good things to do with it. Well, now we're moving up the slope of enlightenment, where we can find the shiny part of AI, the silver lining of AI. And where that silver lining, I think, is going to be is with very, very large data sets. IT security is a perfect example of this. With IT security, we have switches, routers, firewalls, Linux servers, Windows servers, authentication servers, VPN. You have all of these data points, all of these log files from every single one of these that create a massive amount of data. There's more data created from these log files than any human would ever be able to parse and understand, much less correlate between devices. This is perfect for AI. Have it look through all of the data and begin creating those links between those different systems, be able to take all of that data, and you could ask AI, show me the moment this person first hits the network, and show me where they went, show me what they did, and show me what other things they might have done while they were here. That's perfect for AI. It can now sift through the data, correlate between these databases, be able to present to you one single consolidated view for exactly what you were looking for. It's also very good at finding vulnerabilities, finding attacks. There's a lot of things we can do with this on the security side. So there are places where we will come up to the plateau of productivity and be able to say, yeah, AI has a place. But as it turns out, the same people that were here when the technology triggered, turns out the same people are here on the plateau of productivity because AI has given us more work to do. That's what happened. It didn't take work away. It's given us more to do. Instead of us now trying to sift through the data and wasting our time, we can now more simply access the data and find the things that we would have really liked to have seen to begin with. So I love the hype cycle. I love the perspective of this because it applies to almost everything. Any new technology that came along, cloud. The cloud is everything. The cloud is going to replace every computer. The cloud will get rid of every data center in the world. Cloud, 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 cloud. Did it do that? No. We hit the peak. We came down through the trough, and now finally we're where cloud should be. Let's even go back further. Tablet computing. Tablet computings are going to replace every computer in the world. The A+ certification will no longer be useful because no one will have a computer. We will all have tablets. How'd that work out? Exactly. Didn't. We just added on to what we had. The tablet has its purpose. We figured it out. We went through the trough. We came up the slope, and now we're in the plateau of productivity. We know exactly where tablets fit in our world now. We know exactly how they would be used. Yeah, there's nuances, and we're slowly seeing a blending of those together, but nothing like the hype curve. So I tell people, especially people that come to me and say, should I even be investing my time and effort into getting these certifications? Isn't all of IT going to disappear tomorrow because of AI? It will not. Have you, once you get to the very end of my A+ course, there's a section on AI. That's part of the A+ certification these days, for those of you who haven't taken that cert. And we talk about hallucinations. We talk about the way that AI doesn't understand how biased it happens to be because of the data. And we talk about how AI is not accurate. Even the best AI models today that we are working with, especially large language models, are around 70, maybe approaching 80% accurate. Imagine trying to build a business around 80% accuracy. Imagine trying to study for a certification around 80% accuracy. You're going to fail your exam. So there's still a place for me. There's still a place for you. There's still a place for smart people doing smart things, because AI has not even come close to approaching those things yet. And I think we will find the right place, the right fit for AI. And I think we will discover the things that we thought it would be able to do did not quite pan out, but we could still make a run with this technology. There will still be things that we can do with it. In fact, we've been really using AI for tens of years, for a very long time. We just didn't call it AI because it really isn't. It's really just very smart computers that have lots of data and lots of computing power and are able to do those calculations much faster now because modern technology. We just put a name on it because I think that's what drives projects. That's what drives investment. And ultimately, a lot of these companies are driven by projects and investment. Whether those projects are viable, it's secondary. It's not important. Is it important that AI work? Let's invest. We will find the silver lining. We don't want to be left out, so you kind of have to invest. So these companies, they're gosh darned if they do, and they're gosh darned if they don't. There's my southern piece of that coming out anyway. So it's one of those that there are places for this, but not really a place that I think everybody thought we were going to be. Don't worry, your job is probably not at stake. That's not an issue. If anything, there's some great AI jobs that have popped up lately. And if you're good at managing large amounts of data, and you're good at sifting through and understanding how to manage large amounts of data, or you're responsible for maintaining the network that connects all of these large amounts of data, good for you. Now you still have a job. You're still doing great stuff. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's see if we can fit in one more of these to be able to break all of this down. There's so many good questions in here. It's so difficult to be able to get through this because there's so much to choose from. I just never know which one to go with these days. Here's a very common question, and I think one that would resonate with a number of folks. Again, from my good friend, Anonymous. Anonymous asks, hello, I have a computer science degree. I have these certifications as well. Google cybersecurity certification. That's a certificate, not a certification. Microsoft cybersecurity certification, Google IT support professional certification, Meta front-end dev certification, also have Network Plus, plan to write Security Plus. My aim is to get into cybersecurity. Looking at my certifications, do I still have to start with IT support? This is probably one of the most popular questions I get. This has to be in the top 5 of the questions I get because cybersecurity is super appealing. It is sexy. It is fancy. In media, it is hyped. In movies, it is gold. It is bright and shiny. It is what everybody seems to want to do in technology. So I will take you through my perspective of this as somebody who has managed and designed large-scale networks and large-scale cybersecurity implementations. Let's talk about cybersecurity and where it fits. Now, Anonymous is probably a more specific and a broader set of credentials than most people would have because you have a computer science degree, which, by the way, has nothing to do with IT. Computer science is, if we have to draw that Venn diagram, computer science is one circle that is really focused on the development of hardware, software, technology platforms, and building apps. If you're going to build an app or you're going to create a new piece of hardware, that's computer science. There's also the world of information technology, a completely separate circle. And in the Venn diagram of computer science and IT, there's not a lot of overlap between those two. There's a little sliver of overlap in the middle. Information technology is built around operating systems, networks, connecting all of these together, keeping them up and running, monitoring and maintaining them, and keeping all of those systems secure. Two very different worlds. You generally do not have computer science people doing anything on the IT side. You generally do not have IT people doing anything on the computer science side. And that's because each one of those is a science unto itself, if you will. You can spend an entire career being very good at building applications and systems. You can also spend an entire career on the IT side, building networks, managing systems, managing operating systems, making them secure and keeping them up and running. And even then, throughout your entire career, you still don't know everything about that circle. And that's one of the big reasons why those two circles really don't connect with each other. We need people who are very good at building apps. And we need people who are very good at keeping those apps running. But you can't have both of that at the same time from the same person. There's just too much data. There's too much there to do. So let's get back to the cybersecurity aspect of this. Who is being hired for these cybersecurity roles? From this perspective, I'm going to put cybersecurity, which doesn't have a definition. But for the purposes of this conversation, cybersecurity is the IT security people. It's the folks that are implementing the firewall, maintaining the firewall rules, connecting your site over a VPN to a remote location. They are managing the authentication process and the multi-factor authentication. They are collecting all of these log files from servers, routers, switches, firewalls, intrusion prevention. They are collecting all of that data, creating the reports and the monitoring and the security for all of those systems. They are making sure that all of these systems are not affected by an attacker. They're keeping the systems up and running. That's the job of an IT security professional, cybersecurity role in the world of information technology. To be able to do all of those things that I just mentioned, you need to understand how all of those technologies work. How does Windows work? How does Linux work? How does Mac OS work? How does an iOS phone work? How do these tablets work? What about Android? What about networking? What about switching, routing? What about dynamic routing? What about connecting all of these systems together and providing redundancy across all of them? How does the redundancy in an operating system fit with the redundancy of the network? And then on top of all of that, how do you keep it secure? To get to the point where you can answer the question, how do you keep it secure? You need to go through years of building your foundational knowledge in operating systems and in networks. So you're not even qualified for the world of IT security until you understand the foundational aspects of it. As I mentioned earlier, relatively speaking, across all of the jobs available, the entry-level jobs available in IT, I'm talking entry-level jobs in IT. I define an entry-level job as the first job you would get in the information technology world. Not entry level as it's associated with some other reference. I'm talking about your first job. You get your foot in the door with technology. Entry level jobs tend to be help desk, service desk, remote support, network operations center triage, and security operations center triage. And the reason that you're at that fundamental starting point in your career as an entry level position is because you don't know anything yet. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. How often do you hear that? How often has your mother and father said this to you? You have to start at the bottom and work hard and move up. And they're right. It's so frustrating when they're right, isn't it? They're absolutely correct. That is how you start because you don't know the nuances of these technologies. You don't understand how they're implemented in an enterprise. You don't understand what's good and bad about these technologies. You can't even make a decision. What's better in this scenario? Windows Active Directory, or should we put in Mac OS? Or should we do Linux? Which is better? Well, unless you know the operating systems, you can't even answer that question. So you have to become familiar with these. So you're going to be building a foundation, getting Microsoft certifications, getting Linux certifications, understanding Mac OS, understanding mobile technologies. Then you have to understand the networks. How do you connect all these networks together? How do you keep them up and running? Make redundancy across all of these networks. There's a million ways to do that. And then how do you connect all of these different protocols and systems together? And are there places where these protocols and systems will conflict with each other? Yes, there is. So you need to know that as well. So once you get that, once you've gone through years of on the job and you've got years of experience under your belt with operating systems, with networks, finally, you will be qualified to get a job in IT security. That's generally how it works. There are no entry-level IT position, very few, if any, that starts you in the world of IT security. If there is, it's probably they're desperate. There's no other choice. You got to take you. We know you don't know anything, but we're going to put you in this role. You'll learn as you go. There'll be a lot of fire. You'll need to bring some water to put out all these fires, but we're going to put you there. That is incredibly unusual. That is remarkably unusual. You do not find that. Entry level is very often learning the fundamentals so that you can then apply those fundamentals to higher level concepts. Those higher level concepts will eventually get you to the point of security level concepts, at which time you will finally be qualified for a role in cybersecurity or in the world of IT security, if you will. So that's why, and maybe the internet has done a very bad job of this. I do not do this on my site because I come from that world. I worked in that world of cybersecurity, of IT security, and seeing what all of these different organizations do for IT security in their environments. Like I mentioned earlier, I've walked into some businesses, some organizations that were tight with their security. They were on it. They had the tools, they had the processes, they had the procedures. Their network was very well designed and very secure. And that's in the morning. In the afternoon, I walk into a different company, and it's like it's a circus. It's like it's a disaster. It's like you can almost look at the wires and the fibers going by, and they're just on flames. How does it even work? It is so insecure, and there's so many red flags, and there's so many problems, which from our perspective, I was representing a cybersecurity company. That was great. Those were the networks I loved, by the way, because they had a real need. They needed more security. So those were relatively easy to work through. When you get into a network that's so well run, it becomes very difficult to sell a cybersecurity product to. So that's why I will say it's great that you have a computer science degree. You kind of understand the fundamentals of this. But if you work your way into IT and you have an interest in cybersecurity, learn as much as you can about operating systems, learn as much as you can about networking, become as much of an expert in those two areas as you can. That will position you the best for getting into the world of security. And if you don't spend that time and that foundation learning those things, you're never going to get to a point where you will be qualified for these IT security positions. So that's my recommendation, is to set yourself a goal, set a number of goals that will get you to that particular area. And if you're wondering if any of this applies to you, go look at the job postings in your area for a security administrator, a security analyst, a security person, an IT security professional, and see what they're asking for. See what that job is really wanting you to do. And you will almost certainly find that there is a need to have a foundational knowledge in operating systems and a foundational knowledge in networking, perhaps even more than a foundational knowledge and expertise in those two areas. So if you want to get into cybersecurity, that's the way to do it. Don't worry so much about what the internet tells you. Don't worry that they'll tell you, take our 2-week cybersecurity boot camp, and for only $7,500 US, you will be a cybersecurity professional in 2 weeks. No, you won't. You will not. And that won't really position you very well for any cybersecurity role, because you have no foundation in networking, you have no foundation in operating systems. You need to work on the fundamentals. So set yourself those points along the way. It might be a 1.5-year journey to do that. That's an aggressive time frame. This might be a 3-year journey to get to that point. That might be a little more reasonable. But you need to set those marks so that you understand, at what point do I feel like I've done and understood and have an expertise in Windows? At what point do I have an expertise in Linux? At what point do I really understand the protocols going across the network? Could I design a switched network? Could I design a routed network? Could I implement that into a large-scale environment? And how do I create redundancy across all of those? What options are available to me, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of both? Those are questions I had to answer every day. They'd say, we'd like your firewall. We need to make sure these firewalls are up and running, so they need to be in a redundant configuration. Should we configure this to be active-active, or should we configure this to be active-passive? Well, there's good reasons to do either of those. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about your network design as it exists today. Would either of those fit better? And if either of those do fit into that scenario, there are advantages for active-active, and there are significant disadvantages for an active-active configuration. And there are also advantages and disadvantages to an active-passive. So those are the types of questions you have to be able to answer. And you can't even answer that until you have an expertise on the networking side, an expertise with the applications, an expertise with the operating systems. All of that becomes incredibly important. So if anybody watching this, anybody listening is trying to think about getting into the world of cybersecurity. I loved it. I thought every minute of that particular job that I had. I worked at Palo Alto Networks for about 7 years, and every day was fun. Every day was different. Every day was interesting. When you have a product like a Palo Alto Networks firewall, how could it not be? You have the premium, the premier firewall. Nobody else touches what this firewall can do. That much we're all pretty much clear on. Everybody pretty much realizes that. That's why it has a premium in the industry. But it does so much, and it does it so well. It's one of those rare products that actually does what they say it does. That's the fun part, is when you're walking in somewhere and you say, this product will do this, and it will do it very, very, very well. And people will look at you like, you're crazy. You have lost your mind. There's no way any product does anything like that. Let's plug it in. And if we're state and local government, they'll let me plug it in right then. Okay, we'll plug it in right now. We'll put it on the network and we'll watch what happens. Always fun. And what's great about that is every time you plugged into a network, it was a different story. It was a different set of vulnerabilities. It was a different set of concerns. It was a different set of protocols, a different set of applications. Always interesting. Always, always, always interesting. So that's why if somebody is really working towards that cybersecurity role, that's what I would recommend. There's a lot of legwork that goes into that, but it is totally, totally worth it. Totally worth it. If you're interested at all in IT security, fantastic to be able to do that. So that is my recommendation to you. If you are planning on working towards your Network Plus certification, get those objectives, use it as a checklist. We have the videos there to help you. We have the course notes there to help you. We have so much available on our website to help you. We would love it if you would use those. And of course, if you have questions, we've got our Discord. Come on over. That's where I'll be after this. I'm always in the Discord, though. You will always find me and thousands of other people that are there studying. We even have people in our Discord that they already have their certifications. They're already in the industry. They already have jobs where they're doing this type of thing, and you can talk to them. You can ask them questions. You can see, is this really important? Is this really something I should work on? Is this topic something I should consider, or what am I missing? A great way to consider that. Well, that brings us to the end of another hour. Thank you so much for joining us in the after show. Also, thank you for being here in the first hour. The Q&A that we do is always a lot of fun. Being here in the after show, though, gives me an interesting insight over the questions that you have. It's always great to read through those. We have one of these study groups next week. A week from today, we have our Security Plus study group. Come back for that one. That one is always good. We'd love to see you there as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.